You are listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. I'm Elena Paweta, Executive Communication Coach and TEDx organizer. With each episode, I'll share with you communication tips and ideas from top business leaders to help you excel in your career. Welcome to the next episode of Ideas and Leaders podcast. Today, my guest is Reiner Kraft, and he is an executive leadership coach. So I'm looking forward to speaking to him about his approach to leadership. He also is a founder of the Mindful Leader. So he has his specific methodology that we're going to discuss. Hi, Reiner. It's great to have you on Ideas and Leaders today.
Yeah, thanks, Elena, for having me on the show.
So, Reiner, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? I know that you have a very interesting story. You worked in Europe and in the US. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been in the tech industry, in tech for many decades. I spent most of my time in California, in Silicon Valley. And about 7-8 years ago, I moved back to Europe. I moved to Berlin, worked at Zalando, which is a large e-commerce fashion platform. And as I'm in tech, I used to work on all those cool topics on information retrieval, search, personalization, machine learning, artificial intelligence, data science, whatever. So it's a broad mixture of technology. But I moved relatively fast also into, after maybe 5-6 years working as an engineer, moved into tech leadership. And as a tech lead, worked my way through and over many long time, basically many years, got deeper and deeper into tech leadership and explored these ideas of how can you become a better leader, what are the ways to improve your leadership capabilities, and how can you do all of that not randomly, but more in a systematic way. And this is when I got more and more, after I would say now the past 10 years, I got really deep on figuring this out. As my background is also a scientist, I like data, numbers to really help in the guidance of decisions, data driven. And so I explored all those different things on how to very systematically become a better leader. But I noticed that at the end of the day, there's these 3 key ingredients or pillars. There is awareness, there is the mind, which I also call the mind operating system or the mind software. And then there is the body, which is the hardware, where the software is running on. And that analogy helped me very well to bring these things together, awareness, mind, and body. And this is what I ended up with, this idea of a high performance mindset as a foundation for good leadership, or achieving leadership mastery. So that's what I'm really focusing nowadays and in the past years as a executive coach, mentor for CTOs, for tech leaders in that space, or working with business professionals in general in this space of becoming better leaders. This is what I'm doing nowadays, and where I then gradually from tech leadership moving more in supporting others, becoming really good leaders and doing it in a very systematic way.
Yeah, great. I love it. I also have a business and both business and academic background, and I love when I hear that you have a structure, you have a system. It is very easy to understand and easy to comprehend. So you said that your system connects out of 3 main parts: is awareness, mind, and body. And those are the 3 main elements of high performance leadership. So can you tell us a little bit more about each of those elements, and how do you see it, and what can we do to make it work better?
Yeah, sure. So the pillar is, at the end of the day, is awareness. Awareness is, yeah, sometimes also people think about it in terms of present awareness, being more present, being fully there in the present moment. And it's about becoming aware around your surroundings, context, but also your body awareness, mind awareness. So awareness is the secret sauce. And it is so foundational, but so intuitively, so it's always there. You're always, if you are aware, right? It's something people take for granted, but unfortunately, most of the people spend their time over the course of the day in a not so aware state of being. This is, I coined this term in this context, monkey mind, which is the state of mind, the untrained state of mind, where people usually spend most of the time in. In the monkey mind, there is these different aspects of the busy mind, all this thought activity going on. There can be negativity, worry, doubt, and there is, at the end of the day, this untrained state of mind. It's nothing new. The people discovered this thousands of years ago when they were looking at the mind as a major source of stress, but also suffering. And so that's why people use that term monkey mind in some of this context already. And I felt this is actually something that nowadays is through all this technology we have around us with social media, all these channels, information channels every day that we're looking at, it makes things even worse. So the problem is through technology, I would say in the last few years, it's gotten to a point. And I read also a few years ago, I read about this study that basically the attention span of nowadays people when they grow up is like 8 seconds on average. And that is like a goldfish also has 8 seconds. And so this is where we are through, and I think this is through technology, that this capability of staying aware and staying aware over a longer period of time is much harder these days. And that's why making an effort, actually staying fully conscious, fully aware, is so important, because this is when you actually realize, oh, there is all these thought activity here constantly, becoming aware of even of the thought activity. And then once you become aware, then there's things what you can do. That's what I learned is awareness is really the first thing that you have to cultivate. Then you become aware, oh, there's all the stuff going on in my mind and in my body, that you then start to notice. And then you say, there is this problem here in my body, high blood pressure, I can't sleep, right? There's all those things all of a sudden that you become aware of, and that you can then make a priority to actually put in some changes for it.
Wow. Yeah. So I read about this goldfish statistics as well. And I think that, the issue with this awareness and with the focus right now is that we have so many things to focus on. And that's why this attention span is shrinking. So maybe it is not that we are getting more stupid and we cannot focus, but we have so many things. We have social media, we have emails, we can do much more than we could do even 10 years ago. We on this one hand, we're much more productive, but on the other hand, it is really hard to stay aware because all of the things that are going on. So do you have any tips on how we can actually stay aware in all of this craziness that is going on around us, especially as leaders?
Yeah, that's the point. And this is how leadership improves, is if you're becoming more aware, you can increase your level of self-awareness, reflection. So there's all the good stuff with increased awareness that you can get. The question then is, and this is the big question, how can you become more aware? And then there's people, once you actually realize you could become more aware, and that would be kind of helpful, for instance, for decreasing stress levels, sleeping better, and so on, and becoming more effective as a leader, improving the quality of decisions. Then you say, oh, great, now awareness is important. So what do I do? How do I become more aware, right? And that was the big question. And then people, what I've seen in the past, they do random things. They try, they learned about maybe some mindfulness exercise, some meditation. So let's say that they said, oh yeah, meditation I heard is good for becoming more aware. Then they're downloading some meditation app and then they give it a try, maybe a 5-minute meditation. But then they realize they can't sit still for 5 minutes. And so after 1 or 2 minutes, they already become nervous. And so the mind is on, right? Is not turning off. And then they conclude mindfulness is not for me.
Yeah.
I tried it, is not going to work. But then they try a few other things, is also not going to work. And then they give up and they're back to the beginning where they are before. And so this is the big issue, is this random stuff is not going to work. And so that's why I figured, can this be done more systematically so that there is a clear framework, there is an approach that is proven, also based on science? And how can you take your mind from, or your state of mind, from a highly unaware state of mind in a really optimized state of mind, right? And that is basically the approach I'm using, is called measurable mindfulness. And it's basically you're adding a dimension of data, a data-driven approach for mindfulness that makes all this fluffy stuff, that's how I referred to it in the beginning, when I first got introduced more than 10 years ago now. It makes it more tangible and it actually informs you how things are working. And then you can, in a more agile manner, you can make decisions on how you want to advance it. And there is no shortage on methods, ideas, approaches on what you can do. Usually there is mindfulness is an enabler to cultivate more awareness. And there's a plethora of possibilities, but let's look at the data. Which of these methods is actually helping you, which is working for you well, and which is not working for you? That is the important piece. Once you start doing more things that are working for you, you get there gradually, and measurable mindfulness is something that shows you how you're progressing and how you can raise your so-called level of present awareness, your LPA, which is a percentage of the course of the day where you're fully aware in a fully present state of mind. And when people start this level of present awareness, I first teach them how to measure it, because it requires to set up some baseline understanding where one actually is. And usually that level of present awareness is somewhere between 1 or 2%, meaning that 1 or 2% of the day you're fully there, fully connected to the present moment, and the remainder you're basically on autopilot, completely unconscious state of mind, right? Driven by basically a lot of busy mind thinking, rehashing the past, planning the future, but never really residing and staying in this calm space of the present moment. And so getting people then systematically from 1, 2%, let's say over 3 months, to maybe 10%, 15%, or even more. This is the goal of measurable mindfulness, to get step by step. And then once you reach these higher level of awareness, then you can use them to debug your busy mind, right? Declutter the software of the mind, your mind operating system, make it more effective, but also efficient, but also upgrade the body through the science of epigenetics, through biohacking, to get your body in complete new states of energy, right? But to get there, first, awareness is important, because this is what keeps you there doing these things. Because you may have noticed people try something for 2 weeks, and then they get back into their old routines. It's not becoming a routine. And one of the big reasons for this is lack of awareness, right? But if you're becoming aware that you're falling back to defaulting to old routines, to old habits, then you realize, wait, I didn't want to do it. This was what I did before. It wasn't working. I want to do the new thing. And then you intentionally, consciously make a shift to do it. And then over maybe usually 2 months, there is some research also there, 60 days, it takes to really solidify new methods and make it routines, right? Then you have less to think about it, becoming aware, right? But 2 or 3 months, this is what it takes to get you from a very low level of present awareness to a definitely increased level. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so different mindfulness tools, and we need to make sure that we have proper mindfulness tools that are good for us, not necessarily, listen to every guru and repeat everything they say, but we need to find something that works for us. And what about the mind and body? So you said that then after we become more aware, we can declutter our mind. So is there actually a way how we can do this, or what do you usually recommend when you work with your clients? Maybe you can give our listeners a couple of tips. How can we declutter our busy minds and actually focus on what needs to be done?
Right. So as I mentioned, the first step is become more aware. So then the mind comes into a more calmer state of mind. The busy mind is at that point disappearing, because at that point it's more calm, right? And at that point, when the mind is more calm, then you can actually start looking at the mind. And then there is several methods that you can use, also rooted in neuroscience. There is so many ways on how to, for instance, get rid or replace some of those old limiting thoughts and false beliefs. There is methods on how you can get out of these reactive patterns, how you can let go of some of this stale old energy that is no longer needed. So there is all those different options available. I refer to these group of options as mind management, and establishing a mind management practice is basically the step how to do it. And for that, I also, of course, I figured there has to be a systematic way out of these gazillions of different things you can do there to make this very systematic and make it approachable so that you can go very fast from A to B. And so I determined that there has to be, when I bring this together with mind awareness and of course the body, and this is what I refer to the high performance mindset. And so, because people then were asking, how do you get there? How can you do this fast, right? And so I thought about and experimented many years. And then last year I rolled out a training program, the High Performance Mindset, which brings together these different aspects of awareness, mind, and body in a very systematic way over 3 months. And so the methods at the end of the day that you learn, they're proven, they work, but nothing is prescribed. So there is so many other options out there in the space of mindfulness, in the space of neuroscience, but also in the space of functional medicine and epigenetics. So there's so many different things, and new methods are coming out every day. But I think the key thing, what is important to learn, is to really base everything on science and data, so that you got a framework for yourself. It's more like a lifestyle, so that you can say, okay, let's now get rid of some of these limiting thoughts. How do I do this? Well, there is method A, B, C. Let's try out A, and then let's measure the impact of A. Maybe do that for a week, see how it goes. Then maybe I'll start a week doing B. Then I see, B is not as good. I try C, maybe C is better. And then you iteratively basically grow. So you achieve this level of mastery by continuously experimenting. And this is where the growth happens. And if the mind gets decluttered, if the body gets more resilient, has more energy, of course you can meditate better if the body is in better shape. And with more energy, you get more stuff done. It's also clear you could focus better, right? So there is this synergy that happens there. And that's why this high performance mindset as a lifestyle has proved
yeah.
very effective.
So what tools can you recommend to, what can we actually do? So you said that there are several tools. So let's have just one or two for our listeners. What can they start trying maybe to declutter their mind?
Absolutely. So I would say the first tool usually I recommend is collecting data. There is this Oura ring, Oura, O-U-R-A, and some people may have already heard about it, but it is basically tracking pretty much everything on your body that is important, like sleep, activity, heart rate variability, breathing, and so on. And that is a good way to basically get into the world of data. So there's an app that runs with it, and then every day you can see how you're doing on all those different dimensions. And you can learn how to guide you by get this guidance by data. And as an example, heart rate variability is one of the key KPIs, key performance indicators, because that nicely correlates with your overall levels of stress and getting your body into a state of homeostasis, right? It's nicely balanced. And if the mind is in this inefficient form, that I'm untrained form, the monkey mind that I said at the beginning, you'll notice actually that heart rate variability in general is kind of low. So you want high heart rate variability. And heart rate variability itself is not something, an absolute value where you basically have a certain number. You have to look at it in a relative way based on your, for instance, your age, right? The younger you are, usually the better heart rate variability is. It declines with age. And so you have to see for yourself when you do this for a few weeks, how this is basically trending. And if you're doing a lot of stress, if you're having a lot of stress, the mind is in this ineffective state, usually you see also further declines in there. And then you can use, and the second thing I would encourage is there is things, easy breathing exercises, like for instance, Wim Hof is probably is a very well-known guy in the space of biohacking, where he introduced us to his breathing method, Wim Hof breathing. So if you Google this or put it on YouTube, search for it, you'll see a guided breathing exercise, takes 10 minutes, 11 minutes. And those are things that help you to become more present, right? A little bit of breathing here and there, measurement to see where you are, right? And then when you apply these things, when you, for instance, do this Wim Hof breathing, so we'll put hopefully links then all to those things that the listeners can check it out. But if you try these things out and then you notice with the data, all of a sudden heart rate variability is going a little bit up, then you see, oh yeah, there is something there. And then you get more of it, and this is how you can get better, right? Simple things like this.
Yeah, great. Thank you for those tips. So definitely it is good to be tracking ourselves and to for example, with the help of the Oura ring or to use the Wim Hof breathing technique. It is also very effective. And also I wanted to ask you also about this body element. So because we are already getting a little bit there, we're discussing it. So you said you mentioned some of the elements of biohacking and this optimizing our health. So what do you usually recommend to busy leaders who don't have much time to take care of their health? So what is the most important that we need to focus on?
Yeah, so the most important is become more aware. This I said at the beginning is increase your awareness, because then you actually realize how bad it is already, how bad your body is asking you to give it more resources, to give it more time and awareness. That is the first thing. And then you notice, usually if people are in a stressed state like this for a longer period of time, the body is sending signals, and those signals are getting worse. And you can, of course, decide or unconsciously decide to ignore those signals. And it always gets worse. It's very clear. It's not an if, it's just a matter of when you run then into a state of mental exhaustion, or eventually even a burnout. That might also be possible. You may have heard about that. And since I got also deep into this state, but I was lucky at that point to pull out at some point close before the burnout. So, but I know people, clients I work with that had a burnout. I could even at that point, it's way too late, because recovering from that, or recovering when the body already had a stroke, heart attack, or whatever, right, or has cancer, all those things are just follow-up consequences from a poor lifestyle, from an unbalanced lifestyle, from usually triggered by stress. Stress is usually always there. And then it's usually too late. So the idea is do something proactively now, become aware of your body, listen to what your body is telling you. But then, of course, you also have to figure out what to do. So decreasing stress levels obviously is the first thing that you do to figure out, and this you can do with mindfulness, awareness training, breathing exercises, meditations, and so on, decluttering the mind, what I mentioned before. But then if that is taken care of, and that if that is already approached, then now it becomes important to focus on the body. And on a very high level, the first thing is you have to make sure that you're getting all the necessary minerals, vitamins that your body actually needs, or amino acids, fatty acids, as building blocks so that the body can actually function. And usually people have huge deficiencies when I take some measurements of these things, or when they do some lab work, then you see all those deficiencies because of the constant stress exposure they were in. The body needs more resources, but they're not getting more resources. And so there is states of deficiencies. And so the first step is to really refill these things. The second step is also learn about your genetics, your DNA, how this is impacting your overall systems in the body, because you may have some systems that are running better than others, and some systems may need more help. And then you need to give it the appropriate amount of resources, as I said, in forms of amino acids, fatty acids, minerals, vitamins, and so on. But it is kind of complex. I think the tip I would give here, always work with a functional medicine expert or an epigenetic coach. This is what I'm doing, is also epigenetic coaching. Basically, it goes deep into micronutrients to really, because it's a complex piece of work figuring that out. But my tip here would be 99% of my clients always have magnesium deficiency. And magnesium is so important when it comes to stress management, but also for energy. It impacts more than close to, I would say, close to 400-500 at least gene expressions in the body. It's probably more that it impacts. And if you have this deficient level of magnesium, then things are not running that smoothly anymore. And that's why this is a simple hack, so to speak, to, okay, let's look at this by measuring what are my magnesium levels. There's different tests that you can do while working with your functional medicine or doctor to figure out what the levels are. And then there is ways to fill them, refill them. On my website, I also show a protocol on how to fill up your magnesium level. It's not straightforward. It's a complex topic. It needs time and patience to get these levels up, because over months and years of misuse, don't expect that your magnesium levels, that you just pop in magnesium and then magically everything is back to normal. No, this is not how it works. Magnesium is delicate. You can't take too much at once. There's an absorption problem. And of course, if you take too much at once, also, you'll probably run very quickly to the toilet. As that is also a side effect if you take too much at once, right? And so you have to know what you're doing, refilling it over a period of many months. And that is where you get the most bang for the buck. If you can, for instance, get just this one single thing in good shape with magnesium. And the second tip is also related to this, is vitamin D. So those two things, vitamin D and magnesium, if you start focusing on them and use awareness, building up awareness to actually stay on this. because both of these topics, they require months of work. And that's why you have to stay aware in this time, because otherwise, as I mentioned earlier, you get started, get excited, and then you, after 2 weeks, fall back into the old patterns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much, Reiner, for those practical tips. Sometimes even such things as a deficiency of a mineral can cause lack of effectiveness and fatigue and tiredness and so on. So it is really good to check and to keep our body healthy as well as our mind. So thank you so much, Reiner, for this system. Awareness, mind and body for leaders. It is very important to have this holistic approach. So do you have any last words, last tips to our listeners to sum up in a couple of sentences what we discussed?
Yeah, I would think when I look back, for me, the most important part was getting started, to really shift more from a reactive to a proactive approach, make this really a priority. The problem is your own mind is very smart. It will sabotage these efforts. It will tell you limiting thoughts, false beliefs that this is a waste of time, it's not going to work. You will find all kind of excuses to procrastinate. In the meantime, the body is taking a hit and a toll. It's getting worse, and your life gets gradually more and more out of balance, and that's why you eventually run into this. You will run into the state of mental exhaustion. It's just not just this. There's all kind of other symptoms, as I mentioned, coming up. So it's just a matter of time. And so getting into this proactive mode is a big thing, and getting started with a little bit of awareness training, mindfulness training can be a good start. But then if you really want to make systematic progress, figuring out the dimension of data-driven system, and there's plenty of resources on my blog, themindfulleader.net, that also, of course, many videos where I talk about these things, to get going on this, and get excited. Actually, I think when you do this for a few weeks, you relatively quickly get some breakthroughs yourself. And that, what I found, is kind of helpful. If you can see the data that tells you, oh, wow, this is actually working, you're moving in a good direction. And then usually people get motivated to do more. But getting there at the beginning is the hardest, right? And switching to a data-driven approach. There will be so many ways the mind really tries to sabotage yourself, and becoming aware that this is happening is hard.
Yes. Thank you so much, Reiner, for all of your tips. So if our listeners want to learn more about what you do, to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so there is the mindfulleader.net is a great place to start. There's the blog, there's links to my YouTube channel. There is also the program that I mentioned before, High Performance Mind, comes as a program in different flavors, so that people, based on different needs and styles and budgets, can pick what makes sense for them. And those are ways that you can always go deeper on some of these things. But the mindfulleader.net is a good starting place, and hopefully get inspired and see what's doable. And becoming the best version of yourself, becoming the best possible leader, starts with you, and starts with more awareness, starts with upgrading your mind and your body. And this way you can maximize contributions, basically.
Yes, perfect. So we will put all of those links under the episode so that our listeners can immediately jump there and check all of your materials and blog and on your contact details. Thank you so much, Reiner, for being on Ideas and Leaders. It was such an insightful conversation, and I definitely learned a couple of things myself, and I'm sure that it was very useful for our listeners as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Elena.
Thank you for listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Let me know that you listened by tagging me in your LinkedIn profile and using a hashtag Ideas and Leaders. See you in the next episode.